What Really Happened with your host, Mike Rivero. The history the government hopes you never learn. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Friday, August 12th, 2016, getting into the middle of the month. Thank goodness it's Friday. Thank goodness it's Friday. Thank goodness it's Friday. We have a lot of stuff to talk about today. It's been a very, very busy news day. And a lot of hysteria going on over in the political campaign we're going to be talking about. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. That's 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, twiddling our dials, keeping us out of trouble, ready to answer the phone when you call on in. Now, owing to a schedule conflict, the Lady Claire will actually be joining us in hour number 2 today, instead of hour number 3. So it's going to be an hour of me, an hour of Claire and I, and then the third hour it'll be just back to me yakking myself silly as we head down to Kaahumanu Friday. Getting into the news here, as you know, one of Hillary Clinton's biggest problems in terms of public perception and polling is the trust issue. And Hillary is already out there trying to dismiss it, saying that once she's president, Americans will learn to trust her, just like Obama did, or they'll be found dead in a suburban Washington, D.C. park. I mean, that is a very arrogant statement to make, that we'll learn to trust her. Trust takes a long time to build. It doesn't happen in a week or a month or even a year. Trust is earned over an entire lifetime, an entire career. And one betrayal, one lie, one scam, one fraud can destroy that trust. Trust arrives on foot, but departs on horseback. The corporate media is dealing with that right now. They have spent decades, going back to the start of television broadcasting, building the trust of the American viewer, and it's just been absolutely destroyed because of all this propaganda that they're feeding out to support Hillary Clinton's run for the White House, to the point where only 6% of the American people still think there's any value in watching the corporate media, and they're in serious, serious trouble. Now, Hillary is out there banging the war drums, confirming for everybody she's the war candidate. If she's elected president, we're going to have lots and lots of wars. It's going to be fun. And she vows to stand up to China. And she basically admitted this is all about money. Because she says China, the world's second largest economy, has gamed the system for too long. And by golly, gaming the system, that's the divine right of Wall Street. And we're not going to let anybody else in on our action. Now, all of a sudden, we're starting to see a lot of news regarding investigations into the Clinton Foundation. Earlier in the week, we had reported this very quiet little story that had been almost invisible on the corporate media, where the FBI had recommended the Department of Justice open investigations into the Clinton Foundation, and Loretta Lynch had come on back and said, no, we looked at this a year ago, there's nothing there, blah, blah, blah. Went instantly viral all over the net, and today the corporate media and the government are having to deal with it. They're saying, yeah, there are questions about the Clinton Foundation. It has now come on out that 3 of the FBI field offices contacted the Department of Justice saying there needs to be an investigation here. And the top people at the Department of Justice, meaning Loretta Lynch, said, no, 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 no. This is Hillary we're talking about. She's above the law. We're not going to do that. And apparently even some of the Justice Department's own investigators were saying there is something here that needs to be looked at. And Lynch is out there saying, no, you will not do that. You will not go near Hillary Clinton. Go harass the global warming deniers or something. Now, interestingly enough, there is a story that is making the rounds. This got reported in a lot of different places, where apparently James Comey and the FBI are launching the investigation, and they're going around Loretta Lynch and the Department of Justice by going to the new U.S. Attorney for New York, Loretta Lynch's old job. And apparently they have found this New York U.S. Attorney to be much more receptive. And so they're talking about the FBI is basically going into the corruption of the Clinton Foundation. And it's getting a lot of coverage. And you would think at this point the corporate media would be on the side of, let's just make it all go away. She got the get out of jail free card for the email server stuff, and that's it. She's above whatever. And I think the realization is there within the FBI, certainly, that the credibility and legitimacy of the entire government is now on the line. Now, we're going to do a quick shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are rejoining the network at this time. We're talking about news that the FBI is moving forward with an investigation and possible charges regarding the Clinton Foundation and corruption. And they're going around the block by Loretta Lynch by working directly through the U.S. Attorney for New York, who apparently is looking at this very, very seriously. And it's getting a lot of news coverage, which is kind of surprising when you consider that the media has been wholly on board with Hillary up to this point. Now, an interesting little story came out from townhall.com. The FBI always gets its man or woman and may still get Hillary. And they're quoting a source close to FBI Director James Comey that Hillary is still the target of an active FBI criminal investigation. And they're saying the corporate media hasn't been paying much attention up to now, until the independent media and the Internet made a big stink about the fact that, once again, the Department of Justice has said, no, we're not going to touch that. I don't want to wind up dead in Fort Marcy Park here. But as you know, these DNC emails that have come on out paint a very clear picture of public corruption, of using Hillary's position as Secretary of State to benefit the private Clinton Charitable Foundation, which, by the way, as of the last accounting, only 6% of the money they take in actually went to any charities. It's a scam. Now, maybe we're being set up for James Comey to come on out and say, well, yeah, there's a lot of stuff going on in the foundation, but it doesn't look like Hillary intended to do wrong. She's just, her brain is not working anymore, but we're not going to do charges. But there may be one other possibility that I want to discuss with you, and then I'll take phone calls. I know you've all been waiting very, very patiently here. If my theory about Hillary selling secrets is correct, James Comey and Loretta Lynch may have dropped that email server issue because of the risk it would expose Hillary's treason in a scandal that could bring down the entire U.S. federal government. Treason by a serving Secretary of State, espionage out of the State Department, and none of the organs of the government did anything to stop it or deal with it. But we know there are a lot of insiders who want Hillary to be gone. Even within the DNC, there's information leaking out. And James Comey may have decided that to salvage the credibility of the FBI and the government and his own historical legacy, that it's much safer to go after Hillary for corruption with that Clinton Foundation, because that really dark secret about Hillary being a spy, selling secrets to foreign interests, that doesn't surface in that. They don't open up that really bad can of worms there. Now, my bet is on the first option, another cover-up, but we'll see what happens. The fact that this is actually getting a lot of corporate media coverage, to me, is very, very telling. Even Rand Paul is now out there saying it's time to indict Hillary Clinton. All right, let's take some phone calls. Jeff in Toronto, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Michael. How are you?
Doing fine.
Michael, I just had a question. I've been away for a few weeks, and I'm not sure if you've touched on this subject, so if I have, please interrupt me. But I was just wondering, if Hillary Clinton, for the love of God, does get elected, do you foresee, because I've just been paying attention recently over the last few days, the more dead bodies have turned up related to her doctor, and also related to her email scandal. It's just they're dropping like flies left, right, and center, these people. Mm-hmm. And so my question to you is, if Hillary Clinton is elected, do you foresee, like what happened to Mr. Nixon in the 70s, a constitutional crisis where if she gets enough heat on her that this could create a huge problem where she may have to resign or she could possibly get impeached soon after being elected?
Well, I would certainly hope so.
Yep, go ahead.
I said I certainly hope so. You know, and my question is, why do we have to go through that nightmare again that we went through with Richard Nixon? Okay, and by the way, Hillary Clinton cannot be elected to the White House. She can steal it. That's the best that she can do.
Well, Trump's ahead by, as everyone who listens to your show knows, if it were an actual legitimate election, there's no way he's going to lose it. But she's doing everything she can by hook or by crook to steal this election. And a lot of the Clinton Foundation money is obviously there for corruptive purposes, like to pay off people for bribery purposes, and it's just a slush fund that pay people off to help to achieve that goal.
That's exactly what it is.
My question is, like, if this does happen, if she does get quote unquote elected, and there is another constitutional crisis, that could create cover, because I think that another economic crash, much like 2008, but much worse, could happen, and this crisis could help give that crisis, the economic crisis, cover, if you know what I'm getting at.
Actually, I think it would make it worse, because with Hillary being under indictment or impeached or having to resign, it's just going to hammer home the point that the economic disaster and meltdown is solely the blame of these past few presidential administrations who have so badly mismanaged our national economy.
Right, but they could just throw it on the situation, saying, well, this is just, they could just blame it on the Hillary situation, which is coming up, and just, exalt themselves as they always do, because this would be a perfect storm that's being created right now for a complete meltdown of every function of the federal government.
Well, you're right. Politicians will say, oh, it was Hillary. Hillary's the reason for the crash. They did that to Herbert Hoover. But today's Americans are much more knowledgeable and sophisticated, and they understand the economy is already in the Al-Qaeda, and Hillary coming on in just ahead of the crash is really going to have very little to do with it.
I know that during the Nixon administration, when he resigned, it created a lot of pain and suffering for a lot of, not just the institution of government, but also for the general person on the street and for the public as a whole. So I think that people should be aware of that when they're voting for Hillary, because I think that a lot of people don't realize that this woman isn't going to last 4 years. And what I mean by that is it's not going to be any kind of assassination thing, but I think there's so much criminality involved that she's going to have to be removed from office through an impeachment process, because I can't see her being strong enough to defend herself against these litany of illegal activity which she's brought upon herself and her husband over all these years. I just can't see her surviving. I just see this like a house of cards just totally collapsing. I'm thinking, I can't believe it's lasted this long. I can't see going 4 years.
Well, there's an important point here, and it may be the reason why they're starting to take this corruption at the Clinton Foundation seriously. Right now, the entire legitimacy and credibility of the U.S. federal government is on the line. Americans are looking at the way the Washington, D.C. has been handling the Clintons and the Bushes and saying this is clearly a government that's corrupted from top to bottom. It doesn't represent we the people. Again, they're not complying with the Constitution. They're not enforcing the laws. And Americans are saying, yeah, it's time for this government to go. And if this government wants to perpetuate itself, they're going to have to do something to re-legitimize themselves. And they could certainly go a long way to doing that by an honest, open investigation into the Clinton Foundation corruption. Of course, that, unfortunately, also, because that was the collection and laundering point for the foreign donations in exchange for secrets, it's still a risk, but it's less risky than the email server itself.
It just seems like all the leaders of the government, like the head of the FBI, the head of the DOJ, and a lot of these other leaders of these various institutions who are involved in correcting this problem, have so much corruption on themselves that it just creates a situation where there's going to be a lot of inertia, because, you know what I'm getting at? It's just like everyone... It's got some dirt on them.
It all goes back to drug money laundering. It all goes back to that drug money laundering. James Comey was on the board of directors of HSBC when they were caught laundering drug money. HSBC was in serious trouble, but they got this sweetheart deal from the U.S. Attorney for New York for a deferred prosecution, meaning charges were filed, indictments issued, but they're never, ever, ever going to go to court, in exchange for a settlement payment that amounted to just a couple of weeks of HSBC's profits. And the U.S. Attorney for New York at that time was Loretta Lynch. This is all, we're seeing the face of the narcocracy start to be exposed to the ordinary American people. And that's not a very pretty picture. And you begin to understand the reason the federal government has been doing such a lousy job at running this country is because it isn't filled with the best and the brightest. It's filled with a bunch of drug criminals and their cronies. And all they know how to be is drug criminals and cronies. They don't really know how to manage a nation. They don't know how to build roads. They don't know how to do anything except grab the money for themselves. And that's why this nation is in such serious trouble. And in many ways, it is a replay of the corruption that we saw back during Prohibition, until finally it reached a point where the government had to end Prohibition and the corruption merely to survive, because the nation was on the verge of a revolt by the time Prohibition was repealed.
That's a great point. I just see things getting so desperate right now. I mean, you turn on the television, and the media lies to you. Every politician's got, with the exception of a very few people, and I would include Trump in that, he's actually got some dignity to him.
Yeah, but you see, Trump isn't a politician. He's from outside. That's why they are so afraid of him, because when Trump gets into the White House and he realizes just how bad that drug money corruption problem is, he's going to flip out. And he's going to say, we need to scrub the government out. Yeah, he'll come down hard on those money launderers. He's going to come down hard on the drug dealers, and get that corruption out of our government.
Right. So he's going to have. That's why he's got such a rough tone, because he's upset. He's speaking for everyone else. I mean, the gloves are off, and I can't believe that people are picking on him for his tone when Hillary Clinton is literally killing people.
So, well, that's the job of the media. They're going to take anything Trump says and turn it into a negative, and Hillary Clinton could drop a live kitten into a blender, and the media would say, well, it's a home safety demonstration.
Exactly right. So people just have to look through that, maybe pay more attention to shows like yours. But I really appreciate your time. Thank you for taking my call, Mike, and God bless. Take care.
Thank you very much. We're going to switch over to Kathleen in Paris. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Oh, hello, Michael. Yes, some people could have some cognitive dissonance between the fact that, on one hand, we know about the as you say, narcocracy. How do you spell it? How do you say it?
It's narco, N-A-R-C-O, cracy, C-R-A-C-Y, narcocracy. And it's basically ruled by drug criminals.
So this is yes. And so this is the government running drugs, I guess, from Afghanistan through Langley and doing their drug business. But yet at the same time, we're talking about the drug war, supposedly from South America, Mexico, etc.
Well, the government, hang on, Kathleen, let me clarify something. The government has to pretend that they're conducting a war on drugs as part of pretending that they're not the biggest drug dealer in the entire country. And the war on drugs is really the war on the competition's drugs.
Oh, you got my point. That's what I was going to say.
Yeah.
Okay. So now, over to, if in fact it gets so bad that, like, the whole government could come down, is it possible that we could just have 50 states, but ununited?
Well, the country actually kind of started that way. The states were all sovereign. That's why it was called the United States of America. And the central federal government was basically little more than a referee or an umpire resolving disputes between the states, and had no authority inside the states themselves. And that's the way the Founding Fathers set it up. But especially following the Civil War, Congress passed a whole bunch of amendments that consolidated power in Washington, D.C., and it's been deteriorating ever since, to the point where we've got this dispute between the DEA, still insisting marijuana is as dangerous as heroin, and blocking states' attempts at legalization. And as we learned from some of the DNC emails, that is because of lobbying efforts from the alcohol industry. Kathleen, we got to take a commercial break. We have to let you go here. Thank you very much for the call. We got more calls when we come back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And before we go to the phones, I want to put out a word of caution that Hillary's people are trying to find some way to embarrass the independent media on some of these issues about the dead bodies list and Hillary's health, and they're trying to plant nonsense so that if people carry it, they can say, oh, that was nonsense. We discredit the whole issue. It's called poisoning the well. It's an old propaganda trick. And one of our callers mentioned this claim that one of Hillary's doctors, who may have leaked some medical records about here, either had an attempt on his life or was killed. That rumor originated from Saoirse Fall, and we know Saoirse Fall is a known disinfo source. His real name is David Booth, I think it is, and he lives like a mile from CIA's Langley headquarters. Or at least that's where he runs his phony website from. So you have to be very, very careful. If you want to talk about Hillary's health, go with what we know has provenance behind it, like Huma Abedin's email to State Department staffers saying they had to hold Hillary's hand while she talked to foreign leaders because she gets confused. That's rock solid. Don't go on out and just start grasping at straws, because those straws are very likely traps. All right, let's go back to the phones here. Tom in Florida. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, good day, Michael. I got some news for you coming out of South Florida. First, you got Jeb Bush's son who's endorsing Donald Trump, but the whole rest of the Bush family don't want to endorse. There are a bunch of rhinos that are not endorsing Trump. And the father was the head of director of the CIA, and he's one of the guys that are behind this whole movement with Romney and all these other. Am I allowed to say this, Michael? Trash? Can I say trash on your radio?
Yeah, trash is an acceptable word here. But listen, hang on. Let me respond to what's going on. I keep talking about the narcocracy. Remember, the Clinton family and the Bush family and the CIA are all tangled up in that Iran-Contra gun and drug-running operation that was going on back in the 1980s, 1990s. And that's what all ties these people together. The Bushes are going to support Hillary Clinton because they want somebody in the White House who will not open up closets whose skeletons must remain hidden. And that's why the Bushes are going to, except for Jeb's son, and boy, I can imagine the conversation around the dinner table there. But that's the Bushes.
Michael, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say the Bushes and the Clintons and the CIA are all part of this narcocracy, and they're going to look out for each other. They're going to take care of each other, and they are out to maintain their grip on power, or at the very least, keep the lid on everything that they've been doing. Keep it secret from the American people, because when the American people finally wake up and realize that the biggest drug smuggler in the country is the country, they're going to be upset, especially families who have been touched in a very negative way by the illicit drug trade. You know, kids get addicted, people die of overdose. They're going to be really, really angry to find out that, contrary to the propaganda coming out of Hollywood, the drug lords aren't these swarthy, sweaty South American people, but they're right here in the United States of America. They've been bringing in opium from Afghanistan, cocaine from Central America, always under the protection of U.S. forces. We got a whole bunch of pictures from Afghanistan of the coalition forces.
Michael.
Hang on. Let me finish. We got a whole bunch of pictures of these coalition forces, some of them with the U.S. insignia, guarding and protecting the opium fields in Afghanistan and shipping the bags of the raw opium. Okay, that's how bad this situation is.
Okay, now, can I say something, Michael, please?
Yes, go for it.
Okay, well, you're talking about Skull and Bones. That's the Bushes. We know about Skull and Bones. But you're talking about Bill Clinton's brother, Roger, got busted for dealing cocaine.
Yes.
Bill Blythe's brother. Bill Clinton's another thing, here in South Florida, Michael, they're talking about big time on radio today. They're talking about if Hillary gets elected, there's going to be another Mariel boat lift, and Castro's going to empty his prisons again. They're all going to head to South Florida. That's another thing that they're talking about in the news media here in South Florida. And now you need to be talking more about that, because if Hillary gets in there, they're going to flood this country with so many illegals, it's going to be disgusting. But I want to go back to something that you said earlier. Bill Clinton, Billy Blythe, and I want everyone in your listening audience to understand this. And I don't care. I want Donald Trump to run this ad. Bill Clinton paid $850,000 for raping Paula Jones. She got a check for $850,000. How come that is not being an ad by Donald Trump? If Bill Clinton was an impeached president, and they only needed 7 more senators to impeach him, he was impeached by Congress. There were 7 senators short to have him kicked out of office, which would have been in the history books as the first time it ever happened. Because there was Andrew Johnson, but he didn't get kicked out either.
Okay, Tom, gotta let you go. Gotta take a break for commercials. Thank you for the phone call. We'll be right back. And And aloha, welcome back to our show here. And as I mentioned before, we're at the point right now where the credibility of the entire U.S. government is on the line here because of the way they absolutely refuse to touch the Clintons, or for that matter, the Bushes. The two dynastic ruling families who just believe they're supposed to pass the Oval Office back and forth between themselves to make it look like there's still some kind of a democracy here. And a lot of people are really starting to pay attention to that. There was an article out of Russia today saying 5 times when the Clintons escaped federal charges, and it's going on down. Many of the times they were very obviously committing horrendous crimes, and there'd be investigations, and it would get to a certain point, and then all of a sudden it would go away. And when you see that happen enough times, you begin to understand we have a criminal government because the biggest criminals are protected and ordinary, innocent, law-abiding citizens are punished. Spied on, civil forfeiture. It really is an upside-down society, and that is exactly the goal of a narcocracy. Or the hoochocracy from Prohibition days, if you will. Now, getting on to Hillary Clinton's medical condition, a lot of people are still talking about that. Hillary actually gave out a statement saying that really it's just very tiring on the campaign trail. And yes, being on the campaign trail it's very hard. It's a lot of work, a lot of travel, and so forth. And she's just trying to explain away all this stuff about being held up by people. She's tired, and when she gets really tired, she collapses. And again, it's not exactly painting a positive picture of her as someone able to deal with the stresses of the Oval Office. And you look at Donald Trump, who's along in years. He's not having any problem with it. He doesn't need people holding him up on the podium. Now, there's an article came out of aapsonline.org, and again, based on what they're observing from outside, they're saying they don't have Hillary Clinton's medical records. Those are still being withheld. There has to be something in there. If there wasn't something in there, Hillary would release them. 60% of Americans think it's time for Hillary to release her official medical records. And they're talking about the prisms and the glasses and everything. And this article goes on to talk about concussions can cause traumatic brain injury, which may not even be visible on the standard CAT scan or MRI. And they're drawing a parallel with many of our returning veterans who experience blast injury from IEDs, and they suffer from it. And these veterans who have these injuries cannot hold a job or interact normally with their families. Now, do we need somebody with that kind of symptomology in the Oval Office holding the keys to the nuclear weapons? I don't think so. Now, another article that came out from thepoliticalinsider.com is talking about this gentleman named Shkreli, who became notorious for taking this drug that he bought and running up the price 5,000%, and then he backed off on that. But he used to run Turing Pharmaceuticals and said his 15-year experience in the industry has led him to believe that Hillary Clinton is suffering from a serious level of Parkinson's disease. And he says, Shkreli says he's a Democrat. He donates more often to Democrats than Republicans. But he says this is a serious situation, having somebody with Parkinson's in the White House. Now, getting on to the dead bodies list, apparently the Hillary Clinton campaign, following on Julian Assange's insinuation that Seth Rich had been the source of the WikiLeaks, of the Democratic National Committee emails to WikiLeaks, the Hillary campaign has imposed on Seth Rich's family to be silent and to allow a spokesperson to handle the media for them. Now, this new spokesman is Brad Bowman. He's a professional Democratic crisis public relations consultant. He's a spin doctor. That's his job. So obviously there is, in fact, something about Seth Rich's murder that the Hillary campaign is very, very worried about. Now, Hillary, as you know, is pro-illegal immigration, pro-refugee. She wants completely open borders, has time and again attacked Donald Trump for his plan to build a wall along the border to Mexico, while not mentioning anything about that wall that separates Israel from Palestine. And interestingly enough, if you look at a photo of the Clintons' estate in Chappaqua, it too is surrounded by a very high protective wall. So the message, the double standard, the hypocrisy coming on out is Hillary's walls are good, Donald Trump's walls are bad. Now, getting on back to the WikiLeaks emails. They prove Donald Trump is right. The emails include information on Hillary Clinton's armings of jihadists, including ISIS. Now, these emails are not the first time this was reported. There was an official State Department document pried loose with a Freedom of Information Act request. It was declassified that reported this actually months ago, that this was going on. The emails are merely a confirmation. And what's really kind of interesting is back in 2013, Rand Paul grilled Clinton about her awareness of these U.S. weapons making their way into Syria, and Hillary denied any knowledge of it whatsoever. And yet the emails indicate Secretary of State Hillary Clinton knew about it, was taking part in it all the way in 2011, meaning once again Hillary Clinton committed perjury before the U.S. Congress. And remember, some of Hillary's emails that were on her weak private server exposed the names of CIA assets, NSA agents. Now, the corporate media is still out there trying to talk about Donald Trump's assassination comment. Well, first of all, he never said assassination. All he said was that if Hillary steals the White House and she loads up the Supreme Court with liberal judges, that she's going to attack that Second Amendment. And Donald Trump said maybe the Second Amendment people can do something about that, which, if you think about it, seems to imply political activism, because the Second Amendment people is another way of describing the NRA and various other gun rights groups who have a tremendous lobbying presence and political clout. It wasn't a call to assassination, but they're out there, oh, he's got an assassination, he's a terrible man, he's a terrible man. And again, as an illustration of just how incredibly biased the corporate media is all about, there was this story about this Democratic strategist, Bob Beckett, who just came right on out and said, kill Julian Assange because a dead man can't leak stuff, and the media gave him a complete pass. He's talking about committing murder. It's okay. You know, Assange is a bad guy. Hillary's good. Trump is bad. Assange is bad. It's okay for us to want to kill the bad people. And it's really out there. And by the way, Beckett is wrong. Julian Assange is the figurehead. He's the face of a large organization. And were something to happen to Assange, the leaks are going to continue. In fact, there'd probably be more of them because his people would be very angry about that. All right, let's take a phone call. Laura in Kansas, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yes, hi, how are you, Michael? I sent you a video about, called into the Larry Nichols show, and I asked him, since he had close ties to the Clintons, about what her health was like and if she was ever confused or had memory loss before when he worked with her. Of course, he's now, actively against the Clintons and trying to expose the lies and all the scandals and things that they've done. But he actually gave me some insight. It would seem that she has very bad peripheral vision and has always had bad peripheral vision and is afraid of steps and of higher places because she can't see very well from the side. Yesterday, she seemed to become confused during a speech and lose her place. Well, he said that what it is because of her vision being so bad, she loses her shot on the teleprompters. With that said, though, he also expressed that, there could very well be other things going on since her concussions. Obviously hasn't had any contacts with her.
I mean, we need to remember Larry Nichols' last actual, personal contact with the Clintons is back in the 1990s and 1980s, and certainly for very obvious reasons, he is not allowed into their presence for the last, going on 20 years.
Right, and he did say that. He said, it could be very well that she has had brain damage from that has issues now since the concussion. Mm-hmm. I don't know. My personal feeling is, and I know that it's not based on anything that I can put my finger on, but I have just it's almost deja vu back to when Reagan ran the second time, and it was always I can't remember, and people thought he was trying to be evasive with her. I think, when you're a compulsive liar, you got to keep really real sharp about keeping track of your lies, and it seems like she's losing it.
Yeah, she is, and of course Reagan had Alzheimer's. They hid it from the American people. But it got really bad during his second term in office. His own son, Ron Jr., is out there saying, it was really kind of a mess. Well, when Reagan was elected, nobody knew he had the Alzheimer's. It developed while he was in the White House. In this case, whatever's going on with Hillary, whether it's brain damage from the concussion or Parkinson's disease, we know about it before the election, and we need to basically deal with that.
Right, and I wish they would. They do need to release the medicals. They need to, assure the public. Although in her case, I don't think that it would help much with a lot of us. But the fact is that if she is that feeble, or she can't keep track of what she's saying, or she can, that is awfully dangerous for a president, and it could be very easy for her to be steered or, and manipulated, or, told what basically what to say and do, and so no longer she would be running the country. So I appreciate what you do, Michael. I'll let you continue. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. And again, look at what James Comey said. To defend Hillary, to explain why he wasn't charging over the email server. She's reckless. She's negligent. She's careless. Look at that email, official State Department email from Huma Abedin to the State Department staffers saying you got to handhold Hillary because she gets confused. And even Hillary's out there explaining her poor grasp of reality in terms of what James Comey had said about her, saying that she gets brain short circuits. Okay, put together, this is a picture of somebody who simply doesn't have the mental capacity to be a president. And for Hillary, it's an ego thing. She wants to be in the history books as the first female president of the United States of America, and she doesn't care if she wants to do the job or not. It's a badge of honor. It's a fashion statement, like her pantsuits and everything else. It's part of her vanity. And that's a very dangerous situation as well, because the president is supposed to maintain that overview of what's best for the nation as a whole. And unfortunately, we've had a whole run of presidents who completely abandon that. They want to be president just so they can say they were president and be in the history books. And then they go on out and, go boating around Maine and playing golf like crazy. They don't actually want to do the job. They just want the name and the fame. All right, let's grab another phone call. Dustin in New Jersey. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
That was Bob Beckel, not Bob Beckett.
Okay, my mistake.
Yeah, he basically said he don't believe in capital punishment, but somebody should go out and kill the son of a bitch. That's what he actually said on the TV.
Yep.
And yet, you said he gets a pass. Trump didn't say nothing, absolutely nothing like that. And the media is all, the CNN, Don Lemons, which are all hacks. They're all hacks.
Yes.
Everybody knows they're hacks, Hey, Mike, you know what's funny? I hope MI6 pays Bob Beckel a visit when he's sleeping.
I don't want to go there, but he's useful in that he does illustrate to the American people the anti-Trump, pro-Hillary bias of the corporate media. They're all on board. They're desperate to prove they can still sell a candidate to the American people. Because if they can't, one of the effects, if Trump wins the White House, you're going to see those $1 million paychecks for all these prostitutes and correspondents are going to start going away. Because they're not paid these vast sums of money to tell you the truth. They're paid these vast sums of money to sell you things. A new war, a new policy, a new tax, a new politician, a new president. And if they provably cannot do that any longer, then their corporate sponsors and backers are going to say, we're cutting your budget. You can't do what I'm paying you to do.
You know what it also shows, Mike? What a fraud they are. They come out on national TV to say, kill this person, kill that person, go around the world killing this people, that people. And people who vote for these people, they are short-circuited also, Mike, because these people, I mean, I voted for Obama twice, and that was a big mistake, but I woke up after that. But, I mean, these people are absolutely dangerous, and you see it when they actually just come out and say this on national TV now, and the media's with them. All you have to do is go ask Wolf Blitzer and Gloria Borger cheering out at the Democratic convention. You know, they're all in the same group. You know,
yeah, they are. That's why you have all these.
Garbage.
You have all these Republicans who are leaping over onto Hillary's campaign. Now you've got the current chair of the RNC is threatening that unless Donald Trump pulls his campaign back, that the RNC is going to cut off the funds that are supposed to be there for the presidential campaign. They're still trying to find a way to derail him. And we're going to have to mount a real fundraising campaign for Donald Trump if the RNC yanks his funding. But the good news is we're seeing in this election, both of these two traditional parties are destroying themselves in the eyes of the American people. And I think it's time that we got rid of the two-party system and went back to what we had before, which was a system where anybody could set up a party and anybody could run their candidates and not have it dominated by these party apparatchiks.
Can you hold me over, Mike?
Yeah, I'm going to hold you over. Go ahead. We'll be right back.
Thanks.
Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're going to go back to the phones with Dustin. And Dustin, we need to move fast because we got to get through two more phone calls before the Lady Claire joins us at the top of the hours. So what's on your mind?
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right, but the more they get desperate, the more this stuff comes out with the Bob Beckles, and it shows their true, their true colors of who the people actually are. It's just about absolute power. It's not about money anymore. This is about power. And when you see Bob Beckel and his group come out and the media endorses him, this is what it's all about. It's not about anything else but power at this point.
Okay, well,
and I just want
real quick
on Russia. I just want to let you know the S-400s, they're moving into Crimea.
Yeah, we're going to be talking about that. We're going to be talking about that next hour. Okay. All right, Dustin, I got to let you go. Switch over to real quick. Mark in North Carolina, what's on your mind?
Yeah, Mike, two things. One is what Donald Trump meant very simply is that whether the judges rule in the Second Amendment or not, whatever the ruling is, it won't hold water because people know we know our rights, and that's where the Second Amendment comes in. Stop a tyrannical government. And that's when the people rebel.
See, that's what the media is trying to imply that Trump meant. But it's also possible to interpret his statement as saying the NRA and the other gun rights groups could bring their political clout and lobbying to bear to push back on the incursion into our right. Thanks a lot for the call. We're going to switch over to Cody in Texas. Cody, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
A little bit different. I have a little different theory with Hillary. I'm thinking her handlers are instructing her to feign some type of illness because I think they realize that she is a lot closer to indictment than we may even know about. And the court of public opinion, whether it's pedophiles or banksters or any of these high-profile celebrities that are in chances of going to prison, they try to get the court of public opinion to go easy on them, so to speak. So this may be just a ploy of pulling up lane.
Well, they could also say that, she didn't really mean to commit all these crimes, but it's the brain damage. And we've talked about it before, that if it does look like she's going to be arrested and charged and tried, that she could drop out of the race for medical reasons and take the heat and focus off of her. There's all kinds of possibilities out there. We don't know what's going to happen. Time will solve that mystery. Okay, Cody, thank you very much. We're going to let you go, and we're going to close the phone lines here coming into the top of the hour and the Lady Claire. But turning over to the war zones, Russian bombers have destroyed an ammunition warehouse and a chemical ammunition plant for ISIS in Raqqa. They're just going in there with those long-range bombers. Now, the Pentagon is refusing to disclose how many U.S. troops are on the ground in Syria right now. And they're still maintaining the lie. We're putting them in there to fight against ISIS, and yet we see them helping ISIS all the time. All right, we will be right back after these station identification. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 2, the phone. Well, we're actually going to close the phone lines for this hour, and the Lady Claire will be here momentarily. And as we explained at the top of the show, the reason for the Claire to be here in hour number 2 is a schedule conflict. She's got to be doing something else during hour number 3. So she'll be in here at some point very, very soon. Getting back to the war zones. We're seeing the official story. Oh, yes, we're in Syria not to make war on the Syrian people. We're there to make war on ISIS, even though we have State Department documents and Democratic emails showing that Obama and Hillary were giving weapons to ISIS and Al-Qaeda. Now, story that came out of strategicculture.org, Washington escalates covert backing for Al-Qaeda militias in Aleppo. So they're trying to play this double game. They still think that you're all going to believe ISIS and Al-Qaeda are bad little enemies and that we're making war on them, even though every time the U.S. goes into a country where ISIS and Al-Qaeda happens to be, they seem to blow up the country itself and put in a neo-colonial puppet regime, and ISIS and Al-Qaeda are off to the next place here. Now, story coming out of Journal Neo. Aleppo, the reality is not good news for Americans. Okay, there's the Lady Claire here. Get your ears on and I'll get you volume up here. But this story is basically saying that United States naval and special warfare elements are assisting the jihadists to break out of Aleppo. And there are reports of U.S. warships sharing intelligence with the groups Jaish al-Fatah. And they're also saying some U.S. Special Forces may be trapped within the surrounded city. Now, if Syria and Russia find those people, the game is up. With the U.S. claiming that they're there to fight ISIS and Al-Qaeda, and they're caught red-handed fighting alongside ISIS and Al-Qaeda. Okay, we're going to go ahead and put the Lady Claire's microphone up here, and for those of you on BAM user, there's the gorgeous Lady Claire. What is the first thing you wanted to talk about today?
Well, the first thing I want to talk is the uptick in tension between Ukraine and Russia. Apparently, the Russian Federal Security Service said on Wednesday that it had foiled a terrorist attack, a potential terrorist attack by Ukrainian military intelligence against infrastructure in the territory, with the aim of disrupting Russia's parliamentary elections due to start on 18 September. In response, Putin says that he is drawing out of international peace talks on the conflict in eastern Ukraine, and said that he was no longer ready to meet his Ukrainian counterpart, Poroshenko, and German and French leaders in the Normandy format. And I think it's important to remember that the United States and NATO have pledged their allegiance, military and financial, and intelligence resources to Ukraine. We've got the Ukrainian troops right on the border with Crimea at full alert.
In fact, some mercenaries may have been snuck in under the cover of that recent NATO Sea Breeze naval exercise.
Yeah.
They're doing this infiltration situation. And by the way, the terror attack that you were talking about was actually 3 separate sabotage teams.
Okay.
And so as a result, Putin is fortifying Crimea. Meanwhile, you've got the U.S. government still out there making their chest-thumping comment that Crimea is part of Ukraine, and that's just the way it's going to be because we, the United States, have said so. And I'd like to insert something before I let you continue.
Sure.
What Crimea is a part of is up to the Crimean people. that is written into the United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And the United States, as a member of the United Nations, is obligated to comply with that. Crimea broke off from Ukraine in a referendum. Then they had another referendum to merge with Russia, and that's what happened.
Yeah.
And the U.S. has absolutely no legitimate grounds under international law to go on in and say we're going to take Crimea back from Russia and give it to Ukraine. And they're going to start World War III, to do this. But we know who is in the wrong. We know who the aggressor is.
Yeah, and you can't have military at its highest state of readiness without using them because it's too exhausting both financially and physically and emotionally to the troops, right?
Yes.
There was an article in antiwar.com from a gentleman I very much respect, Justine Raimondo, and he said, will a conflict between Ukraine and Russia be an October surprise? And I don't know what the odds are in Vegas, what the bookies are making odds on of this starting, but looking at how massively this is upticked, I wouldn't say that it's going to wait until October or September. I think it's going to start within a matter of weeks.
Well, what I think is going to go on is if it looks like Hillary Clinton is going to stumble and is not going to be able to steal the White House, even with all the massive election fraud, then the war hawks have no other choice but to start the major war before Donald Trump can take the Oval Office. They're going to stick him with the war that they want.
Yeah. And may stick him with a war with China regarding the South China Sea.
Could very easily. I mean, they're just sending the arms all over there, and it does look to me like what we're going to see in October is they're going to crank up the wars. Hillary loves war. She wants to be a war president. Donald Trump wants peace. They could even start the wars and actually see Hillary's support increase. Oh, we're stuck with the war. Who do we want to fight it for us, Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump? And it's an ugly, ugly situation where they're going to just basically start killing millions of people to try and force Hillary Clinton on us, or at least to neuter Donald Trump, who has openly talked about going back to peaceful relations with Russia and China and engaging in trade with them. We need to take a minute to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are rejoining our network right now. And, Claire, what is the next thing that you want to talk about?
Well, this also involves Russia, but it pivots to Syria. The Russian Navy is planning to test-fire rockets during drills that are going to start next Monday off the coast of Syria. And what they're going to be using is a relatively new weapon. It's called the Caliber. And it's a flying cruise missile capable of carrying conventional or nuclear warheads. It has land attack, anti-ship, and anti-submarine variants. And how they target is very interesting. Each missile consists of different components. For example, the booster. It can be launched from a surface ship with a vertical launch system and a booster with thrust vectoring capability. It can also be fired from a torpedo. And how it locks on is through a mix of coordinates and onboard image recognition, essentially matching an uploaded image of the target to what the missile sees in front of it. If all goes to plan, the 1,000-pound payload of high explosive is then guided straight to the target for a violent impact. That's pretty sophisticated.
That is very, very sophisticated.
Yeah.
I know the U.S. was working on similar technology back in, it was a while back.
Yeah.
Whether they could make it work or not. But it certainly bypasses this idea of using screening ships around a carrier. Mm-hmm. Because the idea of the screening ships is they're there to fight off attacks and, if necessary, intercept an attack against the carrier, which is the most expensive ship. But if you have a missile that's going to be coming on in and saying, no, that's not the one I want to hit. I want to hit this big one over here.
Yeah.
That changes the tactics dramatically.
That's a game changer. It's also a way of Russia saying, please don't mess with Syria anymore. We're beginning to get annoyed.
Yes.
Yeah. And the 15th is Monday, folks, this coming Monday. Another article that I saw that really concerned me, CENTCOM whistleblowers, Obama distorting ISIS intelligence. And CENTCOM intelligence reports apparently were altered to hide the poor progress against ISIS in Iraq and Syria, a joint congressional task force has announced.
Well, I mean, if you've realized that the U.S. isn't really fighting ISIS and Al-Qaeda, they're fighting Iraq and Syria, then they have to basically make up all kinds of reports about the stunning success against ISIS and Al-Qaeda, which they're not actually doing. So they got caught on that part of the lie.
Yeah. I mean, it's sort of like touching up an X-ray when someone has cancer to make it appear not as bad as it is deliberately.
I'm sure Hillary will think of that one, too.
Oh, yeah. I'm sure she will. And apparently there have been some new numbers that have come out regarding Yemen. The U.S.-backed Saudi forces in Yemen have created almost 180,000 refugees. This comes from the UN agency which is tasked with tracking and protecting displaced people.
Well, I think we should send them up to Angela Merkel's house.
Dear. And what really bothers me is that we keep enabling, militarily and in terms of intelligence, the Saudi government and military, which is committing war crimes in Yemen. They're bombing schools, they're bombing hospitals, they're bombing private civilians who were just at the wrong place in the wrong time. These are all war crimes, Mike.
And they're not even doing that well, because if you remember this big sales
deal
of these tanks to Saudi Arabia, it came on out that a number of these tanks are to replace ones Saudi Arabia has lost in Yemen. These are Abrams tanks. They're hard to kill, and yet somehow the people of Yemen are able to do them in.
Yeah, and it's very frustrating because what the U.S. adamantly wants is for the al-Hadi government to come back that the Houthis threw out. And I guess they're trying to demonstrate that if you try to throw out a U.S. thug that we've placed there, you are going to get whipped big time.
Yeah, and that's what's going on in Yemen. That's what's going on in Libya.
Yeah.
And with the addition of Libya, now that they're admitting U.S. forces are on the ground in Libya, the United States now has boots on the ground in 4 different countries conducting war.
Yeah, yeah.
Can we call it a world war yet? Can we call it a world war? I want to call it a world war.
Yeah, and it breaks my heart because I don't think in the 21st century there is such a thing as a good war. Karl Marx...
I don't think in any century there's anything such thing as a good war.
But Karl Marx said a lot, but one of the things that he said that absolutely makes sense is all wars are economic. And in the Middle East...
Gee, where have I heard that before? It sounds vaguely familiar. Vaguely familiar.
But it's true. The war against Iraq had to do with the oil and making sure that the oil was only sold in U.S. dollars, and that the people who controlled the oil were the multinationals who contribute to both parties in this country. The war in Afghanistan was about the pipelines and the wealth of mineral riches, and
the opium.
And of course, in Afghanistan, the Afghani people, there is a reason that country is called the graveyard of empires. And it's certainly doing that to us right now.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
And I'm sure the Russians are laughing themselves silly that we got stuck into the same trap in Afghanistan that they did.
Oh, yeah. And the British. Yeah.
Actually, the last leader who was able to really conquer Afghanistan totally was Alexander the Great, and he only held on to it for 3 years before he got kicked out.
Right. And he did this with a number of dynastic alliances and marriages. But that only held for 3 years, as you said. I'd like to bop on over to a little segment I think we're going to call Your Tax Dollars at Work.
Yes.
The $47 billion U.S. Emergency Response Network that's already obsolete.
And it hasn't even started working yet.
It was called FirstNet, and it was created, the concept was created in the wake of 9/11. But all these years later, it's not up and running. And I think it could possibly be one of the biggest boondoggles since 9/11 that the American taxpayers had to pay for that absolutely doesn't work.
I know. I kind of wonder, did they shop this out to the same people who did the Obamacare website?
I don't know.
Because they've spent all this huge amount of money. They bought up a bunch of technology and have been spending all this time trying to plug it together.
Yeah.
And at this point, the technology they invested in is already obsolete. There's much newer, better, faster stuff that's out there, but they're committed to this older system. And it's the inertia of government. By the time they get any of these things up and running, they're already obsolete.
Right, and the GAO, General Accounting Office, has said that the cost range is somewhere between 12 and 47 billion, even as these advances in digital technology that you mentioned have eliminated the need to speed any of it. You know, it's just such a waste. And we have real needs in this country. We've got infrastructure that's crumbling. We've got schools that are crumbling. We certainly have roads and bridges that are crumbling.
Yeah, well, it's some crony somewhere got rich off this deal, that's for sure.
Mm-hmm, right. Another story that I wanted to bring up. ISIS terrorist tells feds he has jihadist brothers in Mexico, confirming Judicial Watch reports. Now, an ISIS operative arrested and criminally charged in Ohio this month has confirmed that the terrorist group has cells in Mexico, according to federal authorities. Apparently, this has been an issue for Judicial Watch for a lot of years, and documenting it in a series of articles as part of an ongoing investigation on the connection between drug cartels, corruption, and terrorism on the southern border. And, in fact, last spring, Judicial Watch broke a story about an ISIS camp just a few miles from El Paso, Texas, in an area known as Anapra, situated just west of Ciudad Juarez in the Mexican state of Chihuahua. Now, if this report is true, Mike, it's a cause for a great deal of concern.
Yes.
But because the federal government has been lying on such a consistent basis about everything, how do we really know whether or not it's not a setup engineered to create fear to use against the American people should an incident happen here at home?
Well, there's a problem with that. Mm-hmm. And the problem with that is if there is any kind of a false flag terror attack in the United States that came across the border from Mexico, it is going to vindicate Donald Trump's call for a wall and secure borders and totally destroy Obama and Hillary's open borders immigration refugee policy. Mm-hmm. And so I rather doubt it's a setup because yet another terror attack here in the United States of America is only going to remind the American people of the complete and epic failure of the NSA spying program on law-abiding Americans. Yep. The CIA, the FBI, the Department of Homeland Security, the TSA, when they're not grabbing my wife's panties out of her luggage, they're all going to be shown as complete and utter failures, total waste of time and money, time to get rid of them.
Yeah, you know, if it doesn't work, get rid of it.
Yes.
And that is very much a very common sense approach to government, I think, if it doesn't work.
Government's approach is if it doesn't work, throw more tax money at it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And declare it works, like they just with the F-35.
Oh, yeah.
They just forget about all the problems. We have declared the F-35 is combat-worthy.
Combat-worthy.
We'll see the first time it actually goes into combat.
Yeah. I wish I felt better about that for the pilots who are going to be flying, because I do respect our military. I just don't want them handed a... Gosh, what can you call the F-35?
The turkey. That should be its code name.
Yes.
You know, there's a flight of turkeys coming in over from the U.S. border.
Oh, dear.
All right.
And apparently...
Send up the cranberry rockets.
And the stuffing. It's a serious subject, but...
Can you tell it's a Friday?
Yeah.
Yes.
It's been an interesting week, folks, for a number of reasons. Apparently, spies for hire are now doing the war in Syria. And every day at 5 p.m., the Pentagon releases a list of that day's contracts worth more than $7 million. Well, on July 27th, buried in the daily email was an eye-catching detail. Military contractors would be working inside Syria along the roughly, give or take, 300 U.S. troops already deployed there. This appears to be the first time that the Pentagon has publicly acknowledged that private contractors are also playing a role in the fight against the so-called Islamic State inside Syria, and it's one more signal that the U.S. is deepening its involvement in the fate of the country.
Somehow I don't think running mercenaries like their Uber service is really going to work out that well.
No, and apparently the contract announcement said that 6-3 Intelligence Solutions, which is a private intelligence group recently acquired by CACI International, won a $10 million, get this, no bid, Army contract to provide intelligence analysis services. And according to the Pentagon, the work will be completed over the next year in Germany, Italy, and most notably, Syria. And I'd like our listeners...
Are these the same people who put together that first alert system that's still
I
not...
don't know, but I wouldn't put it past them.
All right, listen, we got to take a break for commercials. We'll be back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And what is your next... You had a postscript you wanted to make.
I did have a little footnote to the previous story about CACI being chosen in a no-bid contract, folks, to be dispatched to Syria. And apparently, when they were providing intelligence services in Iraq, they were torturing prisoners of war at Abu Ghraib, near Baghdad.
Ooh, nice people.
And, you know, I have to shake my head because we know that torture doesn't work. It only gets the tortured guy or gal to say what they think they want, the torturers want them to say to get the torture to stop. And there was a very interesting German gentleman during World War II, and when Americans or Brits were incarcerated in Germany, they thought, like the SS, this guy was going to tear out their fingernails. He didn't. He would bribe them with chocolate. He'd take them on day passes. His English was excellent. And they'd go to fairs and they'd go to art shows because he felt that he would get something out of them that would be something that would be useful in terms of understanding more about the missions that they were on before they got captured. And he was so respected that after the war, he was invited by the U.S. government to teach at a very prestigious military academy.
Yes.
Because he did this without hurting anyone, without torturing anyone.
Yep.
And when we outsource or offshore torture, what we do is we show the world that we don't care about human rights or human dignity or democracy, and we only observe those values in the breach of those values, but not the observation.
Oh, we'll certainly call out anybody else who's in violation of these. Oh, so you're violating the Geneva Accord. Well, so are you. Well, we're above the Geneva Accord. We're the United States. We're the world's remaining sole superpower, so of course the rules don't apply to us.
And the other thing to remember is that when the United States tortures or contracts it out or offshores it, that means it gives carte blanche for any country that doesn't like us very much to do precisely the same thing to American military personnel and civilians. And I'd like all of our listeners and viewers to kind of chew on that for a second.
Especially if you have family who are serving in the armed forces right now in these war zones.
Yeah.
It is because of the U.S. government crossed that line and used torture. They literally, over in Iraq, tortured innocent Iraqis to death to find nuclear weapons that turned out not to exist, for all you Franz Kafka fans out there.
Yeah.
And that basically will be cited as the justification for these other countries to torture our kids to death for whatever reason they want.
And you know, Mike, it looks to me that hiring contractors like that is something that is engineered to keep these wars going perpetually.
It's certainly going to keep the other side very angry with us.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, it's like Israel's policy where, you know, their counterterrorism operation is to grab Palestinian kids and abuse and torture them and then throw them back out on the street. That's only going to increase the friction and hostility. It's not going to calm anything down.
And, you know, people in other countries around the world do not hate us because of our freedoms. They hate us because a drone bomb just killed their mom, their auntie, their children, and turned them into bloody bits right before their eyes. Now, I don't know how one can stay cheerful through something like that. I don't think it's really possible.
No, generally it's going to color your opinion of the world and of the United States of America. And again, once you get away from the media propaganda, it's obvious who the aggressor is in this new rush to a new world war. And it's not Russia, it's not Iran, it's not Syria, it's not Libya. It is the United States of America. And because we have a government of people who don't know how to do anything at all regarding manufacturing or agriculture or even running the economy. And as a result, making war and killing people, that's all they know, that's what they're going to do. And they think it's going to save the economy, and it won't, because we're going to lose this war. Even if it goes nuclear, we're going to lose this one. And that's why we all have to work together to try and stop this insanity.
Yeah, and unfortunately the insanity clock is ticking very loudly and very quickly right now, especially with this Russia and Ukraine issue.
Yeah, we're using that clock as a ceiling fan now.
Sort of, yes. Bobbing on over to the elections, there was an article from antiwar.com today, and it asked a very interesting question. Will Henry Kissinger endorse Hillary Clinton? What Clinton is trying to do.
Okay, we're going to have to put this on hold.
Okay, all right.
Another commercial break here, and then we'll come back and talking about the war criminal endorsing the other war criminal. We'll be right back. Hello, hi, America. Welcome back to our show here, and we're talking about how an aging war criminal is about to endorse the war criminal who's running for president, I think is what we were talking about.
Yeah, apparently Clinton has been looking for Republican endorsements. But it's interesting that the endorsements for which he's been looking are basically from war criminals from previous administrations, like Henry Kissinger.
Absolutely. And by the way, as further proof that the Nobel Peace Prize is really a joke, Henry Kissinger got one.
I remember.
And newly declassified documents reveal that former U.S. Secretary of State Henry Kissinger blocked efforts to stop the mass killing of dissidents in Argentina. So, nice guy. Really nice guy.
Well, aren't there some countries to which he cannot travel because there are criminal indictments waiting for him?
There are arrest warrants waiting for him in a large part of the world, actually.
Yeah. And interesting, they both had the same job, Clinton and Kissinger. Both have a lot of haters, yet have been elevated to the highest corridors of power. And both can be objected to in theory, but kind of have a Teflon quality where nothing really sticks. Neither Kissinger nor Clinton has ever been punished for the blood on their hands, and there's a lot of blood on both pairs of hands. And what I say to this is, I sincerely hope that such an endorsement from Kissinger will be the absolute KOD kiss of death for Clinton's campaign. Now, please remember, I'm a Christian pacifist. I don't want to see anyone get hurt or harmed. I do, however, want to see Clinton's campaign lurch, stutter, and implode to such a degree that she cannot possibly come back.
Yeah, bringing Kissinger on as an endorsement for anybody who really knows the history of the United States of America from the Nixon era. That's who Henry Kissinger worked for. Mm-hmm. You know, biggest crook in the White House, second only to Hillary Clinton.
Yep.
And but Hillary is trying to pick up all these GOP endorsements. She's trying to pull the Republican rug out from underneath Donald Trump, and even the Republican National Committee is working along that way. And it's still not going to work, because the more they do this kind of thing, the more the American people see this entrenched establishment against Donald Trump, the better Donald Trump starts to look.
Yeah, you know. And endorsement from a war criminal? Really, Hillary? Is that where you want to go? I know for the neocons it is, but for people who actually work out there in the real world and have jobs and are just trying to stay alive, no thank you very much. Because in these upcoming wars of conquest, I mean, she's already said that she will find a way to attack Iran to keep Israel happy, but it will never be Chelsea who will be in those fatigues. It will be other people's children.
Oh, they're already grooming Chelsea for her run at the White House down the road here. I mean, we're now coming into an era of hereditary rule. Bush, Clinton, Clinton, Bush, Bush, Clinton. Yes, Obama got in there, you know, the ringer, but that's the plan. We have these two dynastic ruling families that think the White House is theirs to pass off back and forth between each other.
Yeah. And
except that Jeb imploded.
Yes, he did. You know, he has such an anti-leadership personality. You know, there was no way I think that the American people could have actually gotten behind him.
He could never get that deer in the headlights look off of his face.
Yeah,
and everything. Oh. You know, plus, there are a lot of people who are just as sick and tired of the Bush plan as they are of the Clintons.
Yeah.
They're basically, you know, again, the Bush family, the Clinton family, the CIA are all the face of the narcocracy.
Yeah.
They all joined together at that Iran-Contra gun and drug running scandal. Guns down, drugs back. Totally illegal, both because of the drugs coming into the U.S. and the guns going down were a violation of the Boland Amendment. It was a criminal enterprise from start to finish, and they all got rich off of it.
Right. Turning back over to the corporate media, apparently MSNBC is wary of an October surprise with release of potentially damaging Clinton emails.
Mm-hmm.
And the host of one of their shows is Mika Brzezinski. And she has expressed frustration with Clinton's rudimentary apologies for the recurring email scandals. So she was interviewing Bob Woodward on whether or not they should brace themselves for an untimely October surprise, and said to him, "So, Bob, the Wall Street Journal has an editorial today that said Clinton has left herself wide open for an October surprise. From what has been uncovered thus far and what the answers that she has provided, how realistic is this possibility?" And Woodward said, "Well, it may come in September or this month in August. If you talk to anybody in the security business, talk to someone in the White House recently who knows the reality. Everything pretty much is hacked. There is really no security. And it's not just emails from the DNC or the private server that Hillary had. It's everywhere."
Well, William Binney, who was an NSA whistleblower long before Edward Snowden, is saying that his understanding is NSA does have all of Hillary's emails, including the private ones, or the ones she claimed were private, that were deleted and disappeared. And we know that there are people within the government who have reached their breaking point, and they feel they need to do something about this out of moral considerations in some cases, or just this idea that if the Bush-Clinton duopoly is allowed to persist any longer, it risks the legitimacy of the entire U.S. government as a whole. And that is a very real concern. Certainly FBI Director James Comey has to be aware that the credibility of the FBI as a whole is now on the line because of that get-out-of-jail-free card regarding the server. And that may be a big reason they're making a big deal about this investigation into the Clinton Foundation.
Yeah, that may be the safe haven takedown.
Yes.
And it's amazing. We're looking at credit crawls, and we're seeing that some stations are beginning to look at it as though it's a controversy that has legs.
Well, it does. You've got Charles Ortiz is out there. He's a Wall Street analyst. He's looked at the official documents, and so the public documents show the Clinton Charitable Foundation has only spent 6% of its revenues on charity. There are vast sums of money that went in there. 40% of the money that's gone into the Clinton Foundation came from foreign sources. Some of them are obscured because the Clinton Foundation had field offices in Canada and Europe that would collect the donations and then transfer them in, identified as only coming from the Clinton Foundation Europe and the Clinton Foundation Canada and so forth. So we don't know who was sending this money in, but some of these DNC emails are making it inescapable that donors to the Clinton Foundation were given special access to the U.S. Department of State. There are emails that were in this last release from WikiLeaks showing that, yes, the Clinton Foundation and the State Department were working together closely, even though the Clinton Foundation is absolutely private and should have no input whatsoever. And they'd call up and say, "You need to talk to this guy. Just donate a bunch of money. He wants to talk to somebody at the State Department. Set it up." It is that blatant and obvious. It's called public corruption. It is illegal. And this idea of pay for play is nothing new with the Clintons, because when Bill Clinton was president, they were doing the same thing. Well, they were renting out the Lincoln bedroom.
Yeah,
that was a big scandal back then. And then there were, of course, anybody who wanted a seat on the Commerce Department's trade missions to other countries had to make a donation to Bill Clinton's re-election campaign. That was under investigation, and they were about to indict Commerce Secretary Ron Brown when they had that very strange and mysterious plane crash that he died in.
Yes, theoretically. And
no, he's really dead.
No, I know that, but he's really dead.
Yes.
But and looking at some of the countries that donated to the Clinton Foundation, there is a very terrifying corollary, and I want to share it with our readers and listeners. I call myself an equity feminist. Pay me the same thing you're going to pay a guy, and I'm happy. But all of the countries from North Africa and the Middle East, from whom the Clinton Foundation took money, guess what the common thread was, Mike?
Female genital mutilation. And Hillary's foundation took the money. while Hillary's out there on the campaign trail saying that she is a supporter of women's rights and victims of sexual harassment ought to be taken at their word, except, of course, for that trailer park trash that accused Bill Clinton.
I mean,
don't listen to them.
I don't understand how you can say that you are a feminist universally, which I consider myself to be, and still have the morals of a trout, pardon my French.
You just insulted Trout.
I know.
We're going to get nasty emails.
To take money from countries which still permit this barbaric practice from happening. I shake my head and, come on.
Look how barbaric the United States has become with the torture that we were just talking about.
Yeah.
I remember one time Mahatma Gandhi was asked what he thought of Western civilization, and his reply was, it would be a good idea.
If they'd try it.
if they would try it.
Yes. Yeah. I'd like to go to the economic area right now.
Okay.
There has been a canary in the coal mine incident in Europe. When the European Central Bank introduced a negative interest rate on lenders' deposits a couple of years ago, people didn't think that was going to go as far as it has. And this week, a German cooperative savings bank in the Bavarian village of Gmund am Tegernsee, population all of 5,000 change, said it's going to start charging its retail customers to hold their cash. So from September, for savings in excess of 100,000 euros, the community's Raiffeisen Bank will take back 0.4%, which is a direct pass-through of the current level of the ECB's negative deposit rate. And, and executives, board members are saying, with our business clients, there's been a negative rate for some time, so why should it be different for private individuals with big balances?
Well, call me old-fashioned, but when I was a kid, the whole idea of having a bank savings account was you would put your money in, and the bank would pay you for using your money to issue loans.
Yeah.
And if, they're starting this negative interest rate with a very, very tiny percentage, and people are going to say, oh, it's not worth, but it's going to grow and it's going to grow and it's going to grow until it reaches a point where people are going to pull their cash out of the bank, which is why you're hearing all this talk about the cashless society, where they want to get rid of all cash, and all of your wealth has to be in some bank somewhere in somebody's computer where they can help themselves to bits and pieces of it whenever they feel it's necessary.
Yeah, and that's why I call this the canary in the coal mine incident. Tiny little community bank, and people are going to look for safe havens if this continues.
Yeah, they are, and that's why silver and gold sales are up, and that's something we certainly recommend to all of our listeners, is that you start acquiring silver and gold in small amounts so that there's not a record being kept, because you have a right to keep control over your wealth. And we are heading into a world in which everything that you earn goes into somebody's computer where the banks and the government can help themselves to it whenever they feel it's necessary.
Right.
Remember what happened in Cyprus, the Cyprus haircut?
Yes.
Or the scalping, or the castration, depending upon your point of view. It wasn't unique. It was a trial run. Could they get away with it without triggering an armed rebellion and uprising? And this economy is already broken. This Ponzi scheme economy is globally on the edge of collapse. And creating new money out of thin air is only going to get them so far. They need to be able to help themselves to your wealth in order to keep this going a little bit longer. And that's exactly what they're going to do until the system absolutely collapses. And you've got to be ready for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Another article that I sort of noticed and took me a little bit aback, I believe it was from Global Research this morning, a Canadian outlet that does a lot of interesting research. Was this wartime technology really deployed against journalists inside the DNC? And apparently technology developed to jam phones during the Iraq War may have gotten deployed against journalists reporting on the protests against the political establishment in the United States. While police and government surveillance of protests, including monitoring of cell phone use, is well documented in terms of efforts to block signals at protests, remains an oft-repeated but never proven rumor. It may be impossible to definitely prove that they were using it, but At the Democratic National Convention, a lot of people were noticing they couldn't make phone calls out, they couldn't get phone calls in. And the technology of jamming is a very robust technology right now.
Oh, yeah. It's been around since, since they created radio and started using it for communication. We do know that Apple has now filed a patent for a system that will allow the government to remotely shut off the cameras in the iPhone if you're someplace where the government doesn't want any information to get on out. So this is clearly the thinking that's going on, is the government should have the ability to shut off your own devices in your pocket if there's a chance you're going to see something that the government feels the public shouldn't know about, which is why if you have one of those old shirt pocket Sony cameras that don't have any kind of cell phone connection, you need to hang on to those things and keep them working.
Yeah.
Because they're not going to be able to shut that off. And I'm kind of wondering how long it's going to be before every camera being put out there, even if it's not on Wi-Fi or Bluetooth, is going to have some embedded device to shut it off on command from the government so that you're not taking pictures of something the government doesn't want the public to know. Yeah. It almost seems like we're inevitably headed that way.
Mike, I would agree with you 1,000% on that. And it's very distressing if you happen to care about the Constitution and Bill of Rights. And it indicates that the government thinks that the First Amendment is something that can be broken and battered with high tech if the narrative that you're recording has no relationship to the reality that you're seeing and recording on the ground.
Well, if those Americans would just stay in those free speech zone cages, we wouldn't have to do these kind of things, But it is. It's an abridgment of our First Amendment right to block or interfere with our phone calls.
Yeah.
And at the same time, the phones are all set up so the government can turn them on remotely to listen to you and find out what you're doing.
And in terms of us, I have to laugh because whoever is charged with surveilling us, either on email or on our phones, we're basically vanilla people. What we have to say...
It's the punishment duty.
Yeah. What we have to say is usually pretty vanilla. I might email my minister at church and say, are you aware that this is the music we're going to be doing this Sunday? And have you communicated? And yada, yada, yada. And, but...
Well, what I do is when I go to bed at night, I take my cell phone and I put it on this AM radio here tuned to a Christian Bible banger station. So they're going to have to listen to 8 hours of that just to be able to listen to anything else I might be saying.
Yes, definitely, definitely. I think that's marvelously ironic with you being the born-again atheist in our family.
Absolutely. We got to take a break. We'll be back after these few words. Hello, hi, America. Welcome back to our show here. Last segment of hour number 2. Claire's going to be spending this segment, and then it'll be back to just me in the next hour, hour number 3, and we'll be opening the phone lines then. What did you want to talk about for this last segment?
Well, I came across an article, and I've seen several representations of this, but there was a big splash in The Guardian from the UK about the horrific conditions under which illegal immigrants' children are living in Nauru, placed there by the Australian government. Now, I'm a native Californian, born American. I understand the problems that can come up when you don't have closed borders. But these are children, for heaven's sakes. Canberra, I'm talking directly to all of you, you can do better than this. There have been reports of improper touching of these kids, self-harm. Little girl sewed up her mouth with thread, and the guard just laughed at her.
This is just insane. A little bit out there.
Yeah.
It seems like the whole world is going crazy with all of this strange, bizarre behavior. And it is definitely wrong. And certainly part of the fault has to be with the refugee illegal immigrant parents who brought their children to these places.
Yeah, and the kids are getting punished for the sins of the parents.
Which is definitely not good.
Yeah.
But when we hear this continuing epidemic of child molestation by politicians, by the clergy, this explosion in unbridled police brutality, and it goes back to this question I've been asking. We know that these prescription antidepressants result in poor impulse control. You'll get an idea, you'll just go with it. And we know that as these drugs have been marketed to our society. Mm-hmm. We've seen a correlating increase in domestic violence. And I think it's time to start taking a good look if the bizarre psychological behavior of the whole human population is related to these drugs, which we know they're not actually effective. There was that study that came on out that said Celexa didn't actually cure depression any better than placebos. Mm-hmm. But we know they have these adverse side effects that can lead to extreme violence, suicidal behavior, mass killings, fights, road rage, domestic abuse, sexual abuse. Mm-hmm. We really do need to take a close look at that because other than this pharmacological effect, I'm at a loss to explain why people just seem to be going wild. There's actually, some years ago, there was a science fiction movie about a virus that removed all inhibitions and resulted in extreme violence. And what if we're doing it to ourselves with these chemicals?
Yeah, I'd like to get back to Australia, though, and okay. I want to speak directly to their government.
Real quick.
Can't you start working with an international adoption agency to get some of those kids adopted? Love and structure works miracles.
Or let's stop the U.S. wars that made all these people refugees in the first place.
Amen to that. Thank you so much, Michael.
All right, we're going to turn down Hillary's microphone, and she's... What? I'm sorry. I'm tired. I had a brain short circuit. All right, we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Hour number 3. The phone lines are open now, 800-313-9443. And yes, mea maxima culpa. I did accidentally call my lovely wife Hillary, and that's because I was multitasking and posting. She's laughing like crazy. I'm never going to hear the end of this. Okay. But you're both blondes. That's my excuse. Okay. All right. So the story I was putting up at the time, leading to this, was this story that's coming out about how Hillary Clinton had a rally today at a high school gym in Iowa and could not fill that little tiny place. And remember the video that came out where an animal rights activist tried to protest Hillary, and it was just a small room full of people. So today, Donald Trump sold out 2 sports arenas of people who wanted to see him. That's the real measure of Donald Trump versus Hillary. Forget all the lying polls and the rest of it. Look at the crowds who are showing up. Of course, there's an explanation for that. You know, dead people can vote, but they can't actually show up at the rallies, and that may explain the disparity there. All right, let's go ahead and grab a couple of phone calls. Bob in the Upper Peninsula, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
Hillary Clinton talks about breaking up families all the time, but I am not aware of any law that says the children cannot go back with them.
Well, Hillary is basically pushing this immigration situation in which I think the issue is the anchor babies, where the babies, once they're born in the U.S., they're automatically given citizenship, even if the parents are illegals. And so if you deport the illegal parents, if the child doesn't go with them, then they have to go into social services. But Hillary is pushing this open borders situation, refugees coming on in, and Donald Trump is right. We have a right and a need to secure our borders at this time. And, you know, as far as Hillary is concerned, Hillary is out there saying that an unborn child has no rights and it's okay to kill them. That's a liberal philosophy. And yet if you harm an eagle's egg, you will go to jail in this country. I mean, that shows you how low an opinion of human beings the liberal agenda seems to have right there. Bob, thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go and switch to John in Barbados. Aloha, John. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? John, are you there? Okay, I am not hearing John in Barbados.
My fault. Here he goes.
Okay, John, are you there?
Wait a minute.
Okay. Should we go to Steve in California? John?
Yeah.
Who am I talking to?
It's John in Barbados.
Oh, okay, all right. We had our mixer board had a brain short circuit just then, and Claire is still laughing herself silly in the other room over all the problems we're having today.
Well, actually, I've just got my computer back. That's why I haven't been on for days.
Ah, I wondered about that.
Yeah, and it needed major surgery. I had to have a heart transplant and a brain transplant. But anyway, we are succeeding now.
I want a body transplant. You know, I want Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson's body transplant.
I wouldn't mind Matt Damon's body, but that's...
Oh, okay. Well, that's another one, yes. But, you know, Dwayne's a local boy. Dwayne's from right here in Hawaii. So I'm biased. What can I tell you? What's on your mind today, John?
Well, I've been following what Julian Assange has been saying and all the information on WikiLeaks, and I've come to the conclusion that the really nasty and damaging emails are being saved for an October surprise.
That seems to be a very common opinion. The Democratic National Committee is concerned about an October surprise. MSNBC is out there expressing concern. They're waiting for the next shoe to drop. And certainly, both through September and October, there's no reason to think that more of this damaging information is not going to surface, whether it's from Julian Assange or other people just leaking to any sources they feel they can trust.
Well, I think Judicial Watch may be another one to keep your eye on.
Oh, absolutely. They're doing stellar work. I've always had a lot more confidence in them getting to the bottom of the Clinton scandals than the FBI. But alongside that, we have all of a sudden a lot of media attention on the Clinton Foundation itself. And it feels like something may be ready to break that is really going to start pulling Hillary down. And the downside of that, of course, as I mentioned earlier in the program, the war hawks, if they feel Hillary is not going to get into the White House, they're going to start World War III for real and stick Donald Trump with it.
Well, I think that's what is really serious in Crimea at the moment. You know,
yes.
Ukraine, Crimea. Apparently, Russia has moved, as was mentioned by an earlier caller, S-400s, but on top of that, they've moved major movement of tanks onto the border. And
meanwhile, the U.S. is deploying nuclear weapons to the South China Sea, and that is another flashpoint. And they're really trying to push this war as hard as they can, and ultimately they're going to lose it. Before I let you talk some more, John, we need to do a quick shout-out on the air to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network, and we're taking phone calls for this third hour, plus some other catch-up news left over from the rest of the week. So, John, what else is on your mind?
Well, Syria, really, because according to the lots of news, you know, the Takfiris were making a push, but apparently it's not been successful. The Syrian Arab Army, Hezbollah, and the Russian and Syrian Air Force have been hammering away, and the offensive from the southeast, Aleppo, looks like it's collapsed, and they're on the run again.
Yeah, that's what I'm hearing, and we had that other report earlier in the show where it now looks like U.S. assets in the region, naval assets and special forces, are engaged in trying to rescue what's left of their pet terrorists from Aleppo.
Apparently so. But I don't think Russia's paying any regard. They're just hammering away. And so is the Syrian Air Force. They're just pounding them.
Well, from Putin's point of view,
serious.
Yeah, it's serious. From Putin's point of view, is to get the U.S. terrorists completely out of Syria and hand the U.S. government this generation's version of the defeat of Vietnam in a hope that that will derail this rush toward war. I don't think the U.S. government will be discouraged by that because as far as I can tell from observing from the outside, the U.S. government is absolutely convinced that if they don't get a world war between the dollar and the ruble and the yuan, that the U.S. economy is finished. They are absolutely correct. The problem is they're oblivious to any other possible ways of trying to resolve the situation, bring back our manufacturing, bring back our agriculture. None of these people know how to do it. When you have a government that's made up of drug criminals and their cronies, this is a government that doesn't actually know how to govern, other than to simply kill everybody that doesn't agree with them.
Well, the other thing that was on my mind, Michael, is this $6 trillion or so that's missing from the Pentagon.
Yes.
Is this the budget they're putting to one side for this next big war?
It could be. A lot of people were wondering if that was the reason for the $3 trillion that vanished back in 2001, if the money was being sequestered for some black purpose. But nothing seems to have manifested, and it could very easily be just simply the sum total of all the corruption that's going on within the military-industrial complex.
Well, I mean, it seems that the judiciary, the politicians, the businesses, apart from some, are all corrupt. And it's dragging America down, and it's a shame to see it happen.
It really is. The United States is a nation in decline. And as I said, my best hope for the future is to see the U.S. federal government collapse the way the former Soviet Union did, of its own lies and corruption and complete loss of trust and faith of the population. We're going to have about 3 or 4 months where we're going to have to be taking care of ourselves, our friends, our neighbors, our family, look out for each other while we put together a new government based on pretty much most of the original Constitution and the Bill of Rights. We obviously don't need an electoral college, and we need to have a new amendment in there that says absolutely no more private central banking ever. I mean, even the Federal Reserve is unconstitutional because the Constitution never authorized the delegation of the money creation authority to anybody but the U.S. Congress. They just sort of went ahead and did it, and on the sure and certain notion that nobody would really notice, and a lot of people did, but had there been an internet back then in 1913, there would have been a huge, huge outcry about what was going on.
Well, I've taken all this nonsense to heart, and in fact, I've stocked up on food in the freezers and the cupboards and what have you.
That's a very good thing to be doing right now. And I would say not even refrigerated food, because we could see, the electrical infrastructure. Got to go with freeze-dried or MREs or stuff that's going to store for a very long time without the need for outside refrigeration. We'll get into that some other time in the show here. We got a whole bunch of callers, and John, I'm going to let you go. And thank you for the phone call. We're going to switch over to Steve in California. Aloha, Steve. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, normally as a politician, you wouldn't rebuff anybody who wanted to support you, but I have to say that if Kissinger said that he wanted to support me, I think I'd have to call him out for what he is, and he is a war criminal. And I'd have to bring up the fact of what he said about the American soldier. And if you brought all that out, you'd surely, Trump's got the military vote, no doubt about it, but you'd surely make a lot more fans and a lot more friends if you pointed out that the criminal behavior of his past, no doubt about it.
I think if Kissinger makes the commitment to endorse Hillary, Trump will probably go ahead and do that. But Hillary is out there. Even approaching Kissinger shows a degree of desperation in her campaign right now. She's literally going for the name value. She thinks the Kissinger name will bring some kind of gravitas with it. But she's out there just talking to everybody. I even heard her claim that Hillary Clinton approached Charles Manson for an endorsement. Manson turned her down because he thought it would tarnish his image.
Well, that whole quote he made about the American soldier being a dumb animal to use for foreign policy as a pawn. I mean, you can't erase that. You cannot erase that.
No, that's
and that should haunt him. Plus the other things he's done in his life, he's a war criminal, no doubt about it.
Yeah,
thanks, Michael.
You got it. And if Kissinger endorses Hillary, that's what we're going to put on our graphics. His comment about military people being dumb, stupid pawns to be used for foreign policy. It's a callous attitude. It is common in the high levels of the government, but he said it out there on public, and he's going to have to carry that. Thank you for the call. We're going to switch over to John in Rancho Cucamonga. Aloha. What is on your mind?
Good afternoon, Michael. I just wanted to point out to you and possibly to your darling wife, Claire, that that Claire probably shows too much reverence for the ground on which Justin Raimondo walks. I used to subscribe to a monthly magazine called The Chronicles that's published in Rockford, Illinois.
Mm-hmm.
And about 2 years ago, Raimondo, who has a monthly column there, made the insulting comment I took as an insult, because I'm a member of Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth. For the last,
congratulations.
9 years or so. He said that the 9/11 Truth community, anyone who believes that 9/11 is an inside job, they're all a bunch of crackpots. I thought you might get a kick out of that, too.
I had missed that, and that has completely altered my perception of Justin Raimondo.
I thought it would, and I thought you did.
All right.
And I was, one thing I had trouble figuring out, Michael, every time I read Raimondo's columns, I never could seem to learn anything new, because he doesn't have much new to say. How many times can you say you're against war? But why are you against this particular war? He never got into that. And then I saw that, I was just flabbergasted. So anyway, and I know what you mean about being, all wars are bankers' wars. And I think when you said the sentence you said, you were declaring that you were against all wars. Well, I know what you meant. I think you might want to say, and no one wants to say it the way I'm going to say it, but really the people that the U.S. government is invading and occupying with our troops, the people who are shooting back at our troops, they have a higher moral justification to do what they're doing to protect their lives and their families' lives than our troops do in killing them.
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right about that. And
really, I know it's a hell of a way to say it, but that's what it comes down to.
No, it's a perfect way to say it. And again, it goes back to Sun Tzu in The Art of War, where, he says victory is going to go to the side that feels they have the moral right on their side. And the United States doesn't have that. All the soldiers, all the mercenaries, they all understand. They're an invading horde of conquering, barbarians, and that's all they are. They're there for a paycheck.
Right. That's why the French did not win the final battle at Dien Bien Phu in 1954, and why ultimately I think the U.S. government lost in Vietnam in 1973. I guess was the final thing.
They made a lot of mistakes in Vietnam. First of all, this idea that they could win a war from the air with minimal involvement on the ground, that was a big mistake. The other part of it was all those kids who were in Vietnam, who were drafted and sent over there, understood this was a war on the other side of the planet that they didn't have any emotional connection to whatsoever. A lot of them understood they were just there to grind up military supplies, to justify higher taxes on the American people. The Vietnamese people were fighting for their homes, their families, their businesses, their loved ones, all within eyesight, and they were motivated, where the U.S. forces simply were not.
Absolutely correct. Very pathetic, but very true. Yeah.
All right, well, listen, thank you very much for the phone call.
Thanks a lot for letting me on your show.
Okay, you got it. We're going to switch over to Joseph in Texas. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yes, first of all, I hope you're right that the American people do come to realize that, they're being lied to and everything, because World War III looks like it's very much step by step on its way. I mean, if you look back in 1916, the politics are the same, because even just with that thing with Russia, how they caught some terrorists trying to do something. They weren't even terrorists. They were actual members of the special forces. So that's like, a basic attack by another country, not really terrorism right there. What they were going to do with terrorism, but the people were state-sponsored.
Yes.
And, I really hope that people understand that the reason why, Mexico and the border states are not as bad as the U.S., like the U.S. border states are not as bad, is because of that, the money that comes in, right? And just like with 1916, you had, the whole nation was mobilized to get Pancho Villa. And then we're going over there looking for Pancho Villa, and then all of a sudden the Zimmerman telegraph comes up, and the American people say, oh, Germany was going to use Mexican rebels to invade us. We need to go over there and, teach them a lesson. And I hope that, because now the U.S. has two people to wag at this. They got Russia and then they got ISIS. And then I wonder, if Donald Trump, does, because, once Donald Trump goes over there and once they start militarizing the border, it's going to cause a lot of friction. And that's just a guarantee, just because the amount of weapons that are there and just because the amount of money that's there. I mean, look at friction that's in those cities.
Well,
themselves.
let me interrupt here. Let me interrupt here because we're almost at a commercial break here. Obviously, China and Russia are very credible military opponents that we should be very cautious about. But let's be very honest. Mexico is not going to declare war on the United States of America if we send all the illegal immigrants back because...
No, I'm not talking about war. What I'm talking about is, say they do some terrorist act like the cartels and stuff, and then we blame it on, like, hey, they're working with ISIS, just like with the German Zimmerman letter, because, except that was with states. That's why I hope the American people realize that when they blame stuff on ISIS, that's just the, key to get in. That's the excuse to get into other places. And I hopefully, because, in 1916, we went in World War I, and then Wilson militarized, that's
okay.
what we got
I hear what you're saying, Joseph. I'm sorry. I'm going to have to cut you off. We got to take a break for commercials. We got another phone call waiting after these few words from our sponsors. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're going to go right back to the phones. Peter in Los Angeles. Aloha. Thank you for waiting. What's on your mind today?
Hey, Mike. Hey, Claire. Happy Friday.
Well, Claire's not here. She was in hour number 2 because of a scheduling conflict.
Oh, I'm sorry. I don't have you on the video thing, but Mike, I was going to call up about Hillary, but you guys were talking about something that I have a little more background on, and that was, and I know we've talked about it before, I know you're a big proponent of Sun Tzu.
Yes.
And talking about, morale, basically, in Napoleon's old maxim that morale is to all other factors as 3 is to 1. But Clausewitz also has something called his triad, Karl von Clausewitz on strategy. And the triad is you cannot prosecute a successful war over the long term if you don't have alignment between the people, the army or the military, and the government.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, there was a great book, a useful book called On Strategy, a treatment of the Vietnam War, where they're applying Clausewitz, by a guy named Colonel Harry Summers, applying Clausewitz to our failure in Vietnam, where we started out not having the people behind us in Vietnam. We started out with the Army eventually because of the rules of engagement and the no strategy whatsoever. The Army was lost to that triad, and it even started to destabilize with Eugene McCarthy and Johnson's failure to, run for a second, even destabilize the government to an extent. But and there's one more quote that is apropos for today, and that is, and I don't remember who said this, maybe it was Churchill, that democracies cannot fight a 7 years war.
I've heard it before. I don't remember who said it, but I understand because once the people start turning against the war, they have to shut off democracy in order to continue it, and that right there is probably a very good reason why our government has tried to shut off democracy. They don't want you to see it happening, but that's why the political parties are picking the candidates, and we've got massive election fraud because they don't actually dare let the American people make any choices, or this whole war party is off.
Well, you absolutely are right on. I should have known that you would have gotten right on this, but that's right. And the fact of the matter is, real democracies cannot fight a 7 years war. At least not without a totally stable triad, army, people, government. But we have none of that, and this is not a democracy, and we've been at war for 15 years. And that's the difference. So.
Well, we may have lost our democracy long before that. And again, we know there's been massive election fraud throughout our history. Certainly there was during Bill Clinton's first term in office. There was the book Vote Scam by the Collier brothers. And by the way, I just did a web search. It was General George C. Marshall who said a democracy cannot fight a 7 years war.
Oh, thank you for that, Mike. I've been misquoting him for years. Okay. Well, that's it for me.
All right. Well,
I just wanted to. Oh, one more thing. One more point I wanted to make.
Yes.
About the October surprise business with Julian Assange. I love the fact that all these any sort of transparency is better than what we have, which is none. And I applaud Julian Assange for that, Mike. But what I in the back of my mind, I've got to wonder. He's living in the Ecuadorian embassy.
Yes.
Hopefully, maybe for the rest of his life, and has a contract, I'm sure, out on him. Everybody's would probably bring him down right now and take him out. And you got to think, why is this guy holding out? Why wouldn't he be holding out for some sort of exoneration or, get out of jail free card? You know what I mean?
It's an interesting question, and it may be because he's aware there's nobody in power at the moment who would grant him a pardon, which I presume Donald Trump can be prevailed on by the American people to issue a pardon for Julian Assange. Obviously, the sex crimes is a foreign thing, so the Trump can't do that. And the same thing for Ed Snowden. He deserves a pardon as well. Peter, got to let you go. Got to do a commercial break, and we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're going to take a phone call here, and then we're going to close the phone lines for the rest of the show because I've got a lot of news I need to get on out there. So, Mike in Maryland, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, thanks for taking the call. I wanted to talk about possible bank bail-ins, and to me, it's problematic. Maybe from the bank's point of view, because I'm sure you know of fractional reserve banking. So if the banks confiscate all the available cash in the bank, if there's a derivatives meltdown or something, that would only make a paltry down payment on any losses the banks have. So what are they going to do after that? Just start printing money?
Yeah, at which point the dollar's value would...
and cause hyperinflation. I mean, they'll really be cutting their own throats, because who in God's green earth is going to trust the banks after that?
Or the dollar. I mean, if they try and get out of the derivatives mess by simply, and yes, they're going to plunder the American people first. Congress actually changed the banking laws, I think it was almost a year ago now, where they declared bank savings account holders as unsecured investors in the bank, meaning if the bank has losses, you're expected to share in them. And then they changed the order of who gets paid the first when a bank collapses. Under the old laws, the savings account holders were at the very top, now we're at the very bottom, and the derivatives are at the very top. So there's going to be nothing left for the American people. And yes, they can just start printing money like crazy to cover the derivatives losses. And by doing that, they will put us into Zimbabwe territory. We'll have $100 trillion, paper notes in our pockets, and nobody will trust the dollar around the world. They really are in a corner. They really are in a corner. And that's why they're pushing for this world war, because they think a world war is going to solve their economic problems, or at least distract from them, because it worked 2 times before. Crash of 1907, World War I. Crash of 1929, World War II. Crash of 2008. And here we are on the doorstep of big mistake number 3. Now, at that point, we're going to start seeing communities come up with their own currency. We saw that during the Civil War. We even saw it during World War I, where the U.S. currency was considered absolutely worthless. We saw it during the Great Depression of the 1930s, and we'll start seeing it again, where people are just going to come up with their own currency. And it's important to remember something. When you look at the front of a Federal Reserve note, it says right up here, this note is legal tender for all debts, public and private. What it doesn't include is the word only. They're not claiming that the U.S. Federal Reserve note is the only legal tender for all debts, public and private. The reality is that any monetary unit can be used if the 2 parties engaging in commerce agree to it.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Okay.
Somebody was talking to me. Yeah.
Okay, so
you're absolutely right. So, but this could be like the last desperate effort of the establishment before this, what hits the fan or everything goes south, because then all faith is lost, and then the gig is up, and only a complete idiot would have any faith in the system after that.
You're absolutely right.
I've got a couple of 50 caliber ammo cans full of silver dollars.
I wouldn't be broadcasting that on the radio.
I started buying silver when it was $5 an ounce.
Mm-hmm.
So I've done well in that regard. But do you think that cryptocurrency possibly could be a good alternative to the banking system?
I think any alternative currency is going to come into use when the fiat currency of the private central banks starts to become worthless. The private central banking scam has been imposed on the human race for 300 years, and they got away with it because all of these private central banks in all of these different countries were operating independently. And when one reached the point of a debt collapse, the other nations enslaved to private central banks would send in money to reset the system and start it all over again. The difference today is because of economic globalism and that derivatives exposure, all of the world's private central banks could come crashing down all at the same time. And we, the people of planet Earth, have to be ready to stand firm and say, we're not going to do this again. Now, we know that one of the foundations to try and bring the New World Order, one world government into existence is a global financial collapse, at which point they're going to say, we're going to create a new private central bank for the entire Earth. But if the people understand that private central banking is what destroys economies, they're going to be very, very resistant to that idea. And they're going to say, let's go back to an economic model that serves the people and the country, the one that the United States started with all those, 200 years ago. And stop being slaves to these private central bankers. I mean, the Rothschild family is worth an estimated $500 trillion. That's the wealth they have accumulated from the labor of ordinary people through this fraud called private central banking, in which the private central banks usurp the authority to issue the public currency and then proceed to issue it all as a loan at interest, in order to make us all their debt slaves.
I think a world war with either Russia or, God forbid, China is going to be a tough sell to the American public. I think we've got war fatigue like crazy, and I don't think the vast majority of the American people are going to go along with it. I think you're going to see massive civil disobedience and a huge anti-war effort from virtually every strata of American society.
You're certainly going to see it from me. You're going to see it from me. Anyway, listen, Mike, I got to let you go. I'm running out of time on the show, and there's some news I need to share here today and not hold over to Monday. So thank you very much. We're going to let you go here. The phone lines are closed for the rest of the show because I got some things I got to share with you. Now then, the other day there was this video on CNN where the talking heads were openly laughing and saying, we're giving Hillary Clinton a free pass. We couldn't do more to promote her campaign. This has triggered a firestorm of criticism on all the social media and basically advertised the fact that CNN and the corporate media as a whole are here to sell you Hillary Clinton. They're not reporting the news honestly. They're not reporting it factually. They're part of Hillary's campaign to convince you that she's way out ahead. She's got 15,000 points over Donald Trump. So you Trump voters don't even bother showing up in November. It's a waste of time. Just stay home and watch TV or something. And a lot of people reacting in anger about this. CNN is remaining mum on this. But the video's out. And once it's out on the Internet, there is no taking it back. That's the reality in the age of the Internet and the independent media. You say something like that on TV, about how we're giving Hillary a free pass and we couldn't do more to be promoting her career, everybody hears it and knows it. And it went viral all over the place. Fox News, just now, during my last commercial break, was running a story saying that the American people distrust the accuracy of the corporate media polls, which is we're winning. We're convincing the American people they shouldn't be trusting what's coming out of the corporate media. So it's the next step to getting them to understand there's massive election fraud. There's propaganda trying to sell the war party to us. And everybody has to vote in November. And again, when we get into October, I'm going to really start pushing this idea. Everybody who votes for Donald Trump, after you have left the polling place, just take 2 pieces of tape and put a T on the front of your clothing. because that's going to make it really obvious if they're trying to steal the election, because everybody's going to see who voted for Donald Trump. All right, getting back into the war zones here, we're seeing this bizarre story from the Wall Street Journal, no less, about how Turkey is no longer a reliable ally. They're talking to Russia, and they're getting into all these mutual defense agreements. They're not a reliable ally. And I don't know what the Wall Street Journal thinks we're going to do. Is the U.S. going to attack and invade Turkey now? Especially with a defense agreement with Russia? U.S. foreign policy in the Middle East is failing because everybody understands what's really been going on. The U.S. drops some ISIS and Al-Qaeda into a country and says, oh, we have to go on in and we have to save the country from the terrorists. 5 years ago, they were openly admitting, we're going to get Assad out of Syria and replace him with somebody that we like. The U.S., meanwhile, is out there making these absolutely idiotic statements. Came on out and, following Poroshenko ordering all the Ukrainian army units near Crimea and the eastern Donbass to the highest level of readiness, because he's expecting Putin is going to retaliate for those saboteurs that were caught inside Crimea. Putin isn't going to do that, but that's what he's doing. So the State Department comes on out and simply declared once again, Crimea is part of Ukraine. Mahi dictum est. That's the way it will be. We're the United States of America, and you will listen to us on this. And again, a reminder, and we talked about this in hour number 2 with Claire. What Crimea is part of is up to the Crimean people. That's in the United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights. The Crimeans held a referendum to break away from Ukraine when the U.S.-backed coup d'etat removed the legitimate government and replaced him with the chocolate king, Poroshenko. And then they held a second referendum to say, we want to merge with Russia. And they have that right under the UN rules. And the U.S. does not have a right to go on in and simply say, we're going to take this piece of land away from Russia and give it back to Ukraine. That's basically an act of war. Putin has sent S-400 air defense systems down to Crimea to hopefully discourage anything dramatic following those saboteurs. Meanwhile, the saber-rattling is continuing out there in the South China Sea, story where Beijing is continuing to send their warships around the South China Sea, and please note, it is called the South China Sea. And they're saying that there's one island in particular that represents the red line for Washington, D.C., and it's called the Scarborough Shoal. And it is claimed by China, Taiwan, and the Philippines. The U.S. doesn't even actually claim the island, but they're out there saying if China comes on in, we're going to go to war. Now then, little point you ought to keep in mind to put things in perspective. Scarborough Shoal is 8,572 miles away from Washington, D.C. It's just 11 miles long, and it's mostly lagoon. There's nothing there. But this is going to be the excuse for Washington, D.C. to try and fan up a war with China. Actually, a war with the yuan, which is a threat to the U.S. dollar's global hegemonic domination. And I think probably everybody listening to this show, and most Americans, would agree that we think Washington, D.C. ought to be more concerned with the problems inside our own borders than mucking about on the other side of the planet. And yes, that was with the letter M, for those of you who are looking for reasons to be offended by me. As I mentioned earlier in the show, the Obama administration is adding fuel to the fire in the South China Sea by dispatching enough nuclear weaponry to kill everybody in the region. I don't know what's going on over there. Maybe Obama is sitting there and thinking and saying, you know, I've never actually seen a real mushroom cloud with my own eyes. This might be something to sort of celebrate the end of my 8 years in office. But that's how ridiculous it is. Ron Paul has gone on record about the government manipulating the July jobs report, and he says it's all statistics. They're not counting who's working, who's not working. The jobs weren't created by business. They were created by statisticians who go through this seasonal adjustment. If you take out the seasonal adjustment, we actually lost 1 million jobs in July. But they don't want you to think about that in an election year. You might actually vote for the incumbents. And then they'd have to get real jobs, and we know what the real job market is like out there. Meanwhile, little lesson coming in from Romania. Romania slashed their taxes on the people, and their economy is booming, which makes sense. Now, there is a mathematical formula called the Laffer curve, which is a measure of tax revenues versus tax rates. And the tax revenue at 0% tax rate is 0, and the tax revenue at 100% is the same, 0. Because the more taxes government takes, the less money there is for business development, plus you disincentivize people from working. If they're out there working harder and harder and they get into a higher tax bracket and the government takes more and more away from them, they're going to quit. And the productivity suffers. Ronald Reagan actually understood this, Alzheimer's and all. And when he signed in that huge tax cut on the American people, the economy took off, and the government actually saw an increase in tax revenues. But the liberal idea is that nobody should be allowed to have their own money. We'll just take it all and parcel it back to them as we see fit. And the more they do that, the less and less business is operating, and the tax revenues actually go down. Look at Obamacare. Huge, grab of the people's money, was supposed to generate, billions in profits for the health insurance companies, and tax revenues didn't work out. When you take too much, when the tax rates are too high, tax revenues go down, not up. But we don't have a government of people who really understand how these things work, because they got into the government through Iran-Contra and gun and drug running and cronyism, breaking the rules. Story out of Investment Watch blog. The everyday American is tapped out. Spending is way down. We're seeing more and more stores close. It's called the restaurant effect. Ruby Tuesdays is shutting down a huge number of their restaurants. They can't survive anymore. The whole system is locking up because of the wealth inequality, where all the wealth has been siphoned away from the American people and piled up over that 0.1%, because they're money junkies. And like any other addict, they can't think clearly about what they're doing. And it should be the function of the central federal government, and in particular the president, to maintain the overview of what's best for the nation and the people as a whole, but Obama can't be bothered. He's too busy out there playing golf. And that's why the nation is in trouble and looking to solve, or at least distract from, this economic meltdown with a new world war, which we are in all probability likely going to lose. And that is a very depressing thought, given that I have a first strike nuclear target right outside this office window here, down there at Pearl Harbor. Now, Germany's economic growth has plunged over concerns that the Eurozone may be breaking up, because Germany has, well, we got to take a break for commercials. Back with the last segment of our program after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our program. Last segment of the show on this Pauhana Friday. And I want to flash back to this story here about how Hillary Clinton has a super PAC called Correct the Record, whose admitted task is to flood online discussion boards with pro-Hillary shills. These are not ordinary people with their own honest opinions. They are paid to be there. I guess these are the folks who couldn't get a job over at McDonald's or Chipotle's, and so, being online shills is the best they could come up with. But they are out there. They are admitting it. Now, this Correct the Record PAC is being run by a guy named David Brock. And David Brock was the guy who engineered the smearing of Anita Hill and anyone who supported her during the confirmation of Justice Clarence Thomas of the Supreme Court. Brock is the guy who went on out and basically destroyed Anita Hill in public. And now he's in charge of this PAC that is deploying these trolls onto the online discussion boards. And I bring this up. And plus, of course, there's the actual cyber warriors who are trying to destroy truth websites, such as mine. And I mention this because I need to recruit you all to be a truth squad. When you are on a discussion board or a comment board of an article, and you're seeing somebody who's out there who's bashing Donald Trump and saying, you know, Hillary Clinton is great and it's a conspiracy theory that she was spying and the rest of it, please have the courage to hit that comment button and talk back to them. Yes, this PAC has $1 million budget, but we can outnumber them if we all work together. And that's what it's going to take to defeat this corrupt establishment, the election fraud, the propaganda of the corporate media, is every one of us working together, being willing to step out into the light, hit that button, put your honest comment on out there, and simply drown out the nonsense that from these paid-to-be-there operatives. And once you understand they're there, two things happen. First of all, they become very obvious because basically they're standing there with their hair on fire and insisting they cannot smell any smoke. And second, once the public in general is aware that the Hillary campaign is paying people to post pro-Hillary comments on these discussion boards, it stops being effective. Because people are going to start looking at these comments and saying they don't really make a lot of sense. It's just a lot of name-calling and baiting. And they're going to realize this is probably one of Hillary Clinton's paid online trolls, so we can ignore them. Propaganda only works if the people who are being propagandized don't know what's going on. If they think that these people out there attacking Donald Trump and supporting Hillary Clinton are ordinary citizens, they're going to pay attention and say, all right, you have a right to an opinion. But when word gets out that people are being paid to support Hillary in the discussion groups, it stops working. That's important. This is a call to Rivero's Rangers. There's the music. Time for me to get out here and get something useful done with the rest of the day. Have a really good weekend. Please make a point of remembering you are the independent media, and you need to carry that responsibility out. Share everything that you know with everybody that you know. Working together, we can overcome the corporate media, Hillary shills, and a corrupted establishment. We'll be back on Monday. Aloha, America.